Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you everybody for joining today's Scrum Pulse. I am Lindsay Vellicina from Scrum.org. I will be our moderator today. And today we have two very special guest speakers. We have two professional Scrum trainers, Eveline Roos and Lawrence Bonema, and they are here to talk about the 50 frequently asked Scrum Master questions. And we will kick that off shortly. So can we go to the next slide so we can do some quick items here? So have a look here at the instructions. We are strongly encouraging you to ask questions today. So please use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. If you have technical questions, please utilize the chat, but all Q&A questions for our speakers should go into the Q&A box so that we capture them. In the event that we don't get to them all, we will be able to share these questions with Eveline and Lawrence afterward. So please utilize that. Your microphone will be muted throughout, but we strongly encourage your participation. This session is being recorded and the recording will be shared within 24 hours along with the slides. So next slide, please. So just a little bit about Scrum.org. We were founded by Ken Schwaber in 2009, and we offer training and certification in professional Scrum. And our mission is to help people and teams solve complex problems. We also heavily promote ongoing learning, and this webinar is just a small piece of that. So please check out all of the free resources on our website. And with that, I will hand this over to Lawrence and Eveline to introduce themselves and kick off the discussion.
Yeah, thank you, Lindsay, and we're really happy to be here. My name is Lawrence. I've been an Agile coach in some way, shape, or form for the better part of 21 years, and I'm really happy to be co-presenting this with the always glorious Eveline Roos, who I admire greatly for her knowledge and skill in all things Agile. Eveline, you probably can tell more about yourself.
Well, a little what's to add to such introduction, but I'm Eveline. I have been in the Agile environment for 12 years, and as a professional Scrum trainer, teaching Scrum Master training, product owner trainings, and working together with Lawrence on a lot of things, which also the Scrum boosters and trying to help organizations and teaching. My focus is on teaching, so.
Yeah, and of course that's also my focus. So let's dive into it immediately. This is all about questions, isn't it, Eveline?
Yes, so it's all about questions, and the way we collected these because there's a large amount of questions that we have collected, and we have chosen 10 to explain today. But you probably also have your own burning questions. So I'm going to ask you to write them in the Q&A part of Zoom. And let's see if we can answer some at the end. So we'll first go through our top 10, and then we'll see if we have time to answer your burning questions. So in the Q&A, you can enter your questions. And that's not if it's recorded, because yes, this session is recorded. Any other questions?
Indeed.
Go to the Q&A.
As people start typing in stuff in the Q&A, let's make sure that everybody knows in advance, these are the 10 ones that we're going to answer for sure, because that's what the presentation is all about. I'm going to kick it off with how does Scrum deal with traditional management and deadlines? It's one of my favorites. Of course, this is how this got started, right? So we collected stuff that was asked of us in the classes that we teach. And I personally really like this one, because, well, not only we have recently released a whole book around Agile leadership, but also it's what trips up a lot of people. Like there shouldn't really be management and stuff. And this was tallied under the general question. So how does Scrum deal with traditional management? Well, actually, officially it doesn't, right? So management's not really mentioned, at least as far as I know. I hope I remember that correctly, by the way. But the main thing is as a Scrum Master, of course, you help a manager understand what Scrum is. And if you do that and you talk their language, you help them understand how they could support it and why they would support it. And with regards to deadlines, because it's a two-pronged question, the beauty of Scrum, the beauty of any Agile method for that matter, is that it makes big things into smaller things, and then you deliver on them frequently. And therefore, if you do it well, deadlines should not really be the issue. Of course, you have a nice trade-off there for having an almost perennial discussion on how much can be delivered by any given deadline. So it's always ensuring that you keep the scope of what you deliver and to the budget variable to avoid compromising quality. And on that note, let me stop answering this question and maybe move into the next one. This can be a little bit daunting, right? So if you have a remark or something that you'd like to share about this, also just plonk it in the Q&A. Use the chat to chat amongst yourselves. We're not actively monitoring that. And on that bombshell and that remark, let's see what's our answer with a getting started question, Evelyn. And let's have a look at that second one we selected, which was the best way to start working with Scrum.
Yeah, well, the best way to start working with Scrum is just do it, or just start, I should say. But that's, of course, an easy answer. So if you want to start with Scrum, or maybe you have already tried to start with Scrum, I think the first thing that you should think about is, what problem are we trying to solve? What are current challenges that we run into and that we might solve with using Scrum? So that's the first essential question that you need to have answered. Is it throughput time? Is it the value that we deliver? Is it employee satisfaction that we want to improve? Do we want to improve quality? So think about what challenges you want to solve by using a framework like Scrum. And if you know that, next step is to learn about Scrum, of course. What is a Scrum framework? What is empiricism? What are the elements and the Scrum values? And if you have an idea of that, bring it into practice. So start with a sprint planning and create a product backlog where you list all not all the requirements, where you list the requirements of the product that you are going to create. So do a sprint planning and think about, when do we call something done? So essentially is creating the definition of done. If you know that
last part is my favorite part. With the how the best way to get started is run a sprint planning, right? So just really start with the actual start of Scrum, and don't overthink it. Let's just get after it. So do a sprint planning, get after it, improve along the way.
Yeah, so exactly, do the sprint planning, create done increments, run the event, sprint review, retrospective at the end, and do another sprint. What we sometimes see is that when people want to start with Scrum, they create a big plan and think about, oh, what are all the teams that we need? And how is our product going to look like? What structures are we using? And then they are 3 months, 3 months further, or 3 months have passed and nothing happened. So I would suggest just start and do a sprint planning.
So let's have a look at the other question. And this one is about product backlogs. We're not going to just do one question per topic, right? Because some sections will merit a little bit more attention. And this one is always a nice discussion in the trainings that we have. Who's responsible for product backlog refinement, and when should this be done? For some reason, people have a really hard time to truly understand how simple this really is in essence, because almost everything, when you ask who's responsible in Scrum, the answer is the Scrum team. And especially for this one, refinement is not a team activity in the sense of it becoming an event and everybody doing everything together, but it is a continuous thing. And sometimes people think, yeah, that's typically for the product owner and they should do all of this. And really, wise product owners, even when they're coached that way, they will always do it together with at least one or more people from the team, and then depending on what it is that we're refining, they call on different people. And that's actually really important. That's also why Scrum does not prescribe an event for this. Refining the product backlog is an ongoing activity. You can essentially do it whenever you need to and at any given moment. That's also why the shortest answer, the one I started with, is Scrum team. And when should it be done? Whenever you need to. Now, as flippantly short as that may sound, that's really how simple you should keep it, right? So don't overcomplicate things by adding lots of if this, then that's to that statement. It's really, if we find we need to refine something, then we'll do it. And whoever needs to help out there will help out there. And that's up to and including maybe some external help that the team might need to really gain a full understanding of the item they're refining. That's also perfectly fine. Anything you'd like to add to that, Evelyn?
No, I think you said it perfectly well.
Good. Well, let's hope that people in the chat and in the Q&A also think that's the case. But let's move on to the next question. Evelyn, take it away.
Yes. So the question is, how are last minute requests and other unplanned work dealt with? So during a sprint, a lot of things could happen, like there could be incidents, or the product owner could have new insights that need to be picked up in the sprint. And the main thing is that you have a conversation about it, right? It's not the product owner pushing things, saying, oh, I forgot about this, it needs to be in, take it. No, it should always be a conversation. And if it should go into the running sprint, you should check if it contributes to the sprint goal or not. Because if it doesn't, the product owner can decide to cancel the sprint, to do a new sprint planning, so the new item can be incorporated. And if it does contribute to the sprint goal, you might want to discuss how to fit it in. Also, you might want to discuss what falls out, because we cannot just push everything in, right? Something has to fall out. So that's how we cope with that. Canceling a sprint is, well, something that does not happen oftenly, but for instance, in the Corona time or COVID time, we saw it happening more because, hey, we were working on something, but then Corona hit, we have to do something different. And sometimes sprints had to be canceled. But it is quite exceptional to cancel the sprint.
So I can see the number of questions running up in the Q&A. Lindsay, is there anything you'd like to interject at this moment in time? Or do you think, no, let's keep on going and maybe talk about sprints and goals?
I think maybe we keep on going, and then we'll dig through some of these once you're through this discussion.
Cool. Good. Let's go move on to sprints and goals then. And of course, the first question that we always get asked is, how exactly do you create them? What goes into that, and what makes for a really good sprint goal? And that actually is, again, pretty simple, but this one is actually really hard for a lot of teams, I find, and also to really grasp why this is such a crucial thing. You determine this during sprint planning, as you can read all about that in the Scrum Guide, of course. So I'll try not to give everybody you can literally read this answer. But the sprint goal, as I see it, is something that as a team you craft together to explain not just to yourself, but also to the outside world. This is why we selected for this sprint these product backlog items. And that is a little bit beyond taking the top 10 or the top 20 or it's beyond being busy as a team. It's like, this is what we as a team are going to work on. This is the problem we want to solve. And if you define it in that way, it both explains why you selected these product backlog items, but it could also inform and be the logic behind why you may want to change that selection during your sprint as you gain more insight. So it provides flexibility in that sense, but also coherence and focus. And essentially, it encourages the Scrum team to really work as a team. Sometimes, if it's a particularly narrow goal that only a couple of team members can work on, it explains why for this sprint, we're not really working as a team, right? Some people are just busy and some people are actually working on the sprint goal. Now, that is not something that should happen often, but when it does, and you have a really clear sprint goal that explains why that happens, in my opinion, that could be fine. So it's not a list of activities. That's actually the most important thing to remember here. It is a statement on how this sprint is going to contribute to the overarching product goal in terms of value. That's, well, the literal sentence we carefully crafted to answer that question. And as I actually read that sentence, because I think, oh, that's actually nicely worded, what happens to the work that's not done in a sprint?
So if you have work that is not meeting the definition done during your sprint, and we don't call it the increment then, at the end of the sprint, the work that is not done goes back to the product backlog. Sometimes people say, oh, I will just push it forward to the next sprint, but you actually want to put it back onto the product backlog to be reordered by the product owner again, because it could be that, I don't know, you were creating a Christmas card and you were too late. It would not make sense to automatically forward to the next sprint if the work is not delivering any value anymore. So work that is not done within the sprint goes back to the product backlog to be reordered by the product owner again. That's a very short answer, I guess.
It is. So let's dive a little bit into Scrum Mastery and product ownership. The first question there is, can the accountabilities of Scrum Master and developer be combined? Interestingly, there is a longer answer to that, but the short answer is yes. And that's really important to remember. Scrum does not actually say you can't combine any of those roles. You can be a Scrum Master and a developer. You can even be a product owner at the same time. Of course, at some point, it becomes unwise and generally frowned upon, but really important, not forbidden. The three distinct accountabilities, of course, exist for a reason. They are distinct for a reason, but you can combine them. And in certain cases, actually, I would prefer a developer to be the Scrum Master, especially when it requires a lot of technological savvy. And that ties into one remark that was made in the chat a little while ago with a question. If I go back, so I thought it was Choma Ezi. I hope I pronounced the name right, but if DevOps knowledge and experience is necessary for a Scrum Master, sometimes it is, and when it is, usually that's when you combine those roles. Well, of course, accountability. Sorry, Lindsay. That then becomes really helpful, but it doesn't have to be. It's not a general rule that you have to be really proficient at DevOps. It tends to help if you're doing something IT, of course. But it's not a requirement. As long as somebody on the team can do that, that's fine. Now, let's see if there's anything else that I may have left out. Evelyn, could you school me on this a little bit if you think, yeah, well, actually, you failed to mention this part of the accountabilities?
Well, actually, I was looking into the questions to see if we could connect some of the information to the questions. So I was not, I'm sorry, I was not paying attention.
Well, in this case,
Trust
let me
you.
just finish this out.
Oh,
Yeah.
I was going to say, there is a question that somewhat ties into this that could kind of piggyback off in a little bit of a different direction, but someone asked any hints or tips for getting into the Scrum Master role or position for a person without any prior IT experience, but having extensive other business administration experience, including managerial positions and a PSM1 certification.
Yeah, there actually, my main tip would be go do it. In other words, maneuver yourself in a position on a team that wants to do Scrum. Maybe you can make them want to do Scrum by telling them why you would want to do Scrum, and then volunteer as a Scrum Master. Also, try to not overcomplicate matters, because usually when you explain why you want to become that, as long as that is not like a purely ego reason. It's really to be in service of the team, and it makes me happy to like create high performing teams, or at least I think it might, and therefore I want to try my hand at it. And would you help me get better at that? That usually really helps. And
That makes
especially if
sense.
you already have a nice team, they will probably let you do it, even if the team already has a Scrum Master, because really good Scrum Masters help people also achieve those more personal goals in life. So even if you think, yeah, but we already have a Scrum Master, can't do it, just make sure that people know that that's your ambition, because that's usually where our ambitions get thwarted, because we think, yeah, this is not the right time, and it never is, right? So just make sure people know. That's my main tip.
Great, thank you.
Good.
So let's have a peek back at the next question. What's the difference? And I'm now totally forgetting who's going to pick this up, but I'm thinking it might be me. It's going to be you.
Yes.
Evelyn, what's the difference between Agile Coach and Scrum Master?
So the difference between an Agile coach and a Scrum Master is actually that they are the same. As a Scrum Master, maybe the money difference, which is mentioned in the chat. A Scrum Master is accountable or is expected to serve the organization, to serve the team, to serve the individuals. That's also what an Agile coach does. What a difference might be between the Agile coach and the Scrum Master is that Scrum Master could maybe focus or have a focus on Scrum. Not saying that you cannot use any other complementary practices or any other good ideas outside of Scrum, but the main focus is on Scrum. And for an Agile coach, that might be a different focus. And I know that in a lot of organizations, there's a difference between Agile coach and Scrum Master, where we see usually the Scrum Master being team facing and the Agile coach more overall. But we believe that if you want to do the Scrum Master role well, you're also doing that overall job. So for us, we believe there is no difference.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. This is one that we have to answer, the both of us, because this is actually one of my pet peeves. Agile coach is, Scrum Master is an Agile coach who really knows Scrum. That's my favorite way to say this. So there should be no difference. And if there is a monetary difference in this, by all means, start labeling yourself as an Agile coach in the HR system while serving as a Scrum Master on your developer, on your Scrum teams. And if you really want to level up there, you can also do what I do. I call myself an Agile management consultant. And then all of a sudden you can jack up your rates to like essentially double them. Because that's the thing that we're talking about here, like a progressive HR driven, phase gated kind of process. That's exactly what we tried to escape when people started working Agile, right? So you can be perennially better at being a Scrum Master and serving teams, organizations, individuals. And that's really what I've been doing for, well, at least 16 years now, and what I still enjoy. I'm usually now serve as a Scrum Master to management teams, but I'm still just a Scrum Master. Of course, on my business card, it says Agile Management Consultant to get the higher rate, just to be honest. So
Great.
let's look into Scrum teams. And you can do to me what I just did to you, Evelyn, right? So just be sure, because I know this is also something that you have an opinion on. How do I deal with a team that works on multiple projects? I'll try to answer that like really, really shortly, so that we can both dive into this one. I think in principle, if you work on different projects for the same product, that should not be that problematic. That is actually to be expected. So what's behind a question like this in most of our classes is we're actually doing different products in the same team that may not even be a cohesive set of products. And that's where it becomes problematic, because then you lose focus. And what I always advise to do in that case, because that tends then to be the real question. Yeah, we have different products that don't really relate to each other, and we're supposed to manage all of them. Then I would say really pay attention to your sprint goals and try to align them with which products or product sets you're working on most in this sprint. But I would also just consider telling people this is a suboptimal division of products across teams. Maybe we should make smaller Scrum teams even with more focus on that different product. What do you think about that, Evelyn?
Yeah, well, I'm a little bit more simplistic, maybe, as some people might have noticed. I would say you don't. So you don't work on multiple projects. You want to have the focus. You want to work on one team and on one project. That means that some people might have to make some choices, and that not all projects are priority number one. They cannot be all priority number one, and I think that's also the difficulty behind it, because some organizations don't like to choose.
Yeah, and yeah, that's actually expertly said as well. Live with the fact that you have to make a choice, right? So and actually make that choice. So let's have a look at stakeholders, because these, of course, are the people that sometimes thwart our well-intentioned attempts to really make hard choices by wanting it all and wanting it now. So what if they don't show up to your sprint review?
Well, if they don't show up at your sprint review, that might have a variety of reasons, right? Stakeholders might have a busy schedule or might not have the time to attend, or they have 3 teams that they need to attend and they're all at the same time. So first, of course, is the question, why are you not attending? So have a conversation with the stakeholders and see if you can fix the problem. What's also important is to understand why we have sprint reviews. So sprint reviews, and we want to inspect and adapt on the increment that's being delivered. We also want to look forward to our future work to see, hey, should things be changed in order? Do we see any dependencies? And if you have all the stakeholders at the table, they can give their opinions or they can give their insights at kind of the last responsible moment before you go into a next sprint planning. So explaining why we have a sprint review and why it's essential for a stakeholder to be there, so they can have they can share their opinions, and not afterwards by emailing, but by just having a conversation, and addressing the importance of the stakeholder presence, being able to influence the product backlog. And of course, the product owner has the last decision, but if you have all the stakeholders at the table, it would be a great place to have the conversation on the ordering.
To give my pithy advice on exactly the same question is, I would make that the topic of the next sprint retrospective, to make sure that we really start to understand, why are they not coming? So what are we doing wrong there? Are we inviting them wrongly? Are we not having that conversation that Evelyn just mentioned? If need be, communicating the absolute necessity for them to participate in those sprint reviews by doing something that I've seen happen in some large Dutch corporations, where they actually deprioritized any and all value being listed for a certain stakeholder because they refuse to come. So if you're not coming, we did try. We did really talk to you about this. We really tried to convince you and help you out there. Apparently, this is not valuable to you, so we'll do something of value to someone else. And that actually fixed the problem. It's brutal. It's not the first option, but it's something to consider also.
Yeah.
Sometimes,
go ahead. Sorry.
Sometimes it's not the team's mistake, right? So sometimes it is actually the stakeholder not wanting any part of this. It is, I think, the team's responsibility and also the Scrum Master's responsibility to really do what you mentioned, Evelyn.
Yeah. And I'm going to say something that might not, but yeah, well, stakeholders are usually also interested in, where does my money go? Where did my budget go? So as a last resort to convince them to be there, like an average sprint is like 80,000 euros or dollar in the Netherlands. So a question you could ask to your stakeholders: do you want to know where your $80,000 went? Then join our sprint review. Then you can see. But that's the last resort.
Show them the money. Nice reference. At that show them the money, we are exactly on time to start answering some questions. Let's have it for the Q&A. And one thing before we start really trying to answer the 34 questions that I see in the Q&A listed there. So we're probably not going to go through all of them. You can also see the QR code here where you can download straight from the Scrum.org website, the booklet with the 50 questions, and that's without any email demands and stuff like that. So we'll probably spam you, but that's because we already have your email. It's not because you're giving it for this booklet. So good. Let's see, Lindsay, what's the first question you would like to see us struggle with?
Sure. So thank you all for these questions. We'll get through as many of them as we can. They're very broad spectrum of questions. So this first one here. So how do you make the team take real ownership?
Well, I can start there by saying you don't make them take ownership. The thing with especially ownership in the more extreme sense of the word, what you want to do is create an environment where the team takes ownership because they want to, and you lead them in a way that essentially makes you want to hold them back instead of making them do it. And now for that to really happen, you have to make it their thing. You have to really make sure that it taps into their personal reasons to work on this team. And that requires a little bit more talking and finessing, and also a little bit more thought, which is exactly the point of not just refinement, but also of product goals and sprint goals. And that's why it's all lined up neatly together in terms of goals, to really tap into that intrinsic motivation so you don't have to make people do anything. Does that make sense?
Does to me. If you have any follow-on questions on that, whoever asked that, please let us know.
Yeah. And before we go to the next question, I'm going to ask you to do a short body break. So we've been together for 30 minutes and had to keep you awake. I'm going to ask you to do a short stretch, and we all cannot see you, so no worries about that.
Great idea.
To get the oxygen flow running. A little bit of oxygen to your brain that might help. Maybe you pop up a new question because your brain will get a boost from your body break.
Is this one of the TBR techniques that you use, Evelyn?
Yes, it is. Yeah, it helps in every session. So I hope everyone has done it, but I cannot check it.
Let's look at a refreshing new question then.
Yeah. Maybe, yeah.
Okay. So what techniques are available for Scrum Masters to convince the PO not to change scope during the sprint?
Well, there are many reasons to not want to change the scope within the sprints, because probably some of the work has been worked up on already. So it might be difficult to return it, not the right word, but to how do you call that?
Backtrack?
Yeah.
To roll it back, or
to roll it back or to reverse it. And so it might be wiser to say, okay, wait until the end of the sprint. Most common sprint length is 2 weeks, so wait for maximum 9 days, and then we can we might want to add that to the sprint. It also does something with the morale if you keep changing the scope over and over of work that you just started. Might leave your developers a little bit feeling like they are not taking seriously, or that they're being played with.
Yeah, also
Right. So the question really points to more so like, what recommendations do you both have to convince the product owner not to change the scope?
yeah, usually what I do there, and this is me talking also as a recovering project and program manager, it's more a technique from the dark side of like ages ago, but it still really works. And actually, I do think it's the right thing to do. Show them the impact it has on the ability of a team to deliver value. Just show them the numbers. This is what happened. You had 2 changes, and now the team has only delivered this little bit of value. And plus, it was demotivating, right? So, and then you have 2 reasons. So, demotivated team, and we did not deliver a lot of value. So that decision should be something that's worth that fact to have people less happy, therefore less productive, but also generally less productive because they need to shift their focus. That impact is usually quite visible in the numbers.
Great. Thank you.
And we have some suggestions in the chat also. I don't know if they're the best suggestions, but you could try them out.
Yeah, someone said have the PO pay for the sprint, average of 80K as mentioned.
And that would help.
Yeah. Great.
So let's pick up another one.
Sure. So although acceptance criteria is not mandatory in Scrum, but definition of done is, what guidelines do you have on how to write good acceptance criteria?
I generally answer this question by saying, yeah, acceptance criteria may not be mandatory in Scrum, but if you're doing some kind of product delivery, you could see the definition of done as the generic acceptance criteria that need to be true for each and every single product backlog item that you're working on. And then for any given specific product backlog item, you'll probably have some acceptance criteria that also talk to points where you could slice that product backlog item into maybe smaller ones if you need to, but also the things that need to be true only for that specific product backlog item to be done. So you have the generic stuff that's in the definition of done, needs to be true always. Those are actually also acceptance criteria, in my opinion. And you have the maybe specific product backlog item acceptance criteria that I tend to call acceptance criteria when I work with teams. I don't know if that helps, but that's the difference I tend to make in practice.
That makes sense. Okay. Should we move on to the next question?
Mm-hmm.
I saw one on, I'm reading through the questions. I saw
Feel free to pull some.
about from Scott. Do you coach users and stakeholders how to act in a sprint review? We have a pretty large audience, and for me, it's too quiet. I want users to get a little angry when there is carryover. I want feedback and questions. I don't think our audience knows we want them to speak up. So that's a good question. So how do you get your stakeholders engaged, and instead of having a showcase or a demonstration of the work, you want to have the collaboration, you want to have the feedback, you want to have those questions. And if you have a large setting or a large audience, that of course is a little bit more challenging, because what happens probably is that the hippos in the room, or the high-paced person, or the person with the loudest voice will speak first, and it might leave others not to say anything. So what I usually advise is to break that up into smaller parts, do a sprint review as kind of in a bazaar format or a market format, and break up the big group into smaller groups. And maybe place, if you're doing Zoom or online session, you could create 4 breakout rooms. If you're doing it physical or in person, you could create 4 stations with laptops on it and have some team members go through a specific topic. So on one laptop, you would have, this is our current increment. And on another laptop, you would have the product backlog. On another laptop, you would have innovative ideas. And then maybe another laptop, I don't know, just for chatting or something. And then you would ask the group of stakeholders to divide into smaller groups and maybe spend 10 to 15 minutes at each station or at each laptop. That will increase the engagement and the collaboration, and might give you the feedback that you're looking for, that you need. So change the format a little bit. That might give you more value out of the sprint review. I hope that
Cool.
answers your question,
That's
Scott.
good advice. Did you have something to add, Lawrence?
No. It's just I'm also adding some typed answers because I was looking at the questions and thought, these ones are actually really quick to answer. The one I'm now typing up is, can we use Scrum management in elementary school? And that's one really close to my heart. I would advise people to just have a look at both Edu Scrum and Scrum at School to find out how to do exactly that, because not only is that possible, it is currently the vanguard of education. It's really, really exciting. And something that, because I have a kid in school, is kind of close to my heart. The results are amazing. Like in the Netherlands, the schools that run EduScrum, they have an average grade point average of 1 full point higher than other schools, which is actually, it's incredible that is such a big difference.
That's great.
Yeah, really nice initiative. Yeah.
Were there any other questions that you saw in the Q&A, Evelyn, that you're just dying to answer? Or do you want me to?
I don't know if
Hold
you
on.
have any, because I was reading through them, but I did not see.
Okay.
I started at the top again because
Yeah.
coming in.
Okay, just a little commercial for everybody and a reminder. If you're entering questions into the chat, can you please move them to the Q&A so that we capture them? That would be great. Thank you. Okay, so this question here, how can the team best plan how much work can be done in one sprint? Should we use our estimations? We do planning poker. Or are there better ways to ensure that there's the right amount of tasks in a sprint?
Do you want to answer that, Lawrence, or are you still typing?
No, I can answer that because it's an often asked question, right? So should we even do estimates? And in my opinion, you should only really do estimates when you don't already know the answer, just by looking at what did we manage to do in the past couple of sprints. And preferably even just looking at the number of product backlog items, because the better you are at refinement, what you'll notice is the closer those product backlog items will end up being when they hit sprints, right? So when you actually start working on them. And when that happens, doing all the planning poker, even if you have fun doing it, doesn't really make a ton of sense anymore, because mathematically it becomes sort of the same thing. So to have a really quick answer to that, actually just look, how many items can we normally get done? Never plan more.
Yeah.
That's a little bit pithy, I know, because everybody's saying, oh, but it's never going to be accepted. And that's the whole point.
Mm-hmm.
Actually try to get that to be acceptable behavior, because that's going to like really make your life better. And also all of a sudden make you a truly trustworthy, dependable team, because now you're never over promising and under delivering. Now you're really promising what you actually can deliver, and you're not like buffering because you're scared to promise anything. It's really based on data. These are the brutal facts.
Yeah, and I think we also discussed while answering the FAQs that we would always leave some time or some space in your sprint backlog for unforeseen stuff, that we do not plan to full capacity or assumed full capacity, but that we take in less to have space for other unforeseen stuff which might happen. People get sick, things might be more difficult than they seem, or new incidents come in, that you have a little space. Never plan for a full 100%. I have found a question. I marked it as to answer it live, so it was of an anonymous attendee. The question was, is it correct for the product owner to set the sprint goal before sprint planning and bring the tickets from backlog based on that, and not generating the sprint goals at the end of the sprint planning? So a common practice or thing that we advise is for a product owner to think about, of course, first the product goal, and then think about what could a sprint goal be that could contribute to that product goal. So he could kind of have a suggestion for a sprint goal. But when we get into the sprint planning and you have that suggestion of a sprint goal, and it turns out that, that person is sick, or that we don't have all the capacity that we need, or people are on training, we cannot pick that up, then in the sprint planning, you would craft a new sprint goal. So, and that is a process that goes on that's happening in the sprint planning. So you cannot like predict the sprint goal and then take it into the sprint and then add product backlog items to it. No, it's a process that happens during the sprint planning. So short answer is no.
And maybe to tie into this, also answer a question from Madison Adams that came in live. What would your recommendation be for setting a sprint goal for a team that works on one product, but they have different areas of focus per sprint? So not all members of the development team can work on the same area of the product at any given time. Then the extra remark there is made that there's multiple work streams for the same product to deliver during a single sprint. And depending on the size of these teams, I would seriously consider having if this happens all the time, I would seriously consider having like smaller, maybe even micro Scrum teams with complete focus, instead of what feels to me to maybe be sub teams. Because sub teams tend to be less effective. Of course, if you need this team to be cross-functional and therefore they are together, then it's perfectly fine to work on several things on different aspects of the product at the same time if they deliver a set of value that as a team you can work on. Try to not create multiple sprint goals though. So try to craft a sprint goal that captures those three things that have inherent value. I hope that helps. Well, if not, then feel free to just contact us to chat about this further, because this is actually something that happens all the time. So it's a really good question.
Yeah, thank you. All
I
right.
found a question by Rodney Sanchez. It says, bugs found in testing tasks are included in the same sprint, and what happens to those issues not solved in that sprint? So, I want to say of course, but maybe it's not of course for you. If you find issues during testing, they have to be fixed before the end of the sprint, because else it will not be a done increment. Solving those issues is part of I hope, is part of your definition of done. So if you want to deliver done increments, you have to complete all the testing tasks and solve the issues or incidents. And as we stated before, if the issues are not solved before the end of the sprint, the undone or the not done product backlog item goes back to the product backlog. So I hope that answers your question, Rodney, or do you want to add anything, Lawrence, to that?
Nope. I think that's pretty much sums it up.
Great, thanks. Seems like looking through the Q&A here, there are quite a few new Scrum Masters on here, so that's exciting. This question here from Xandor says, I'm rather new to Scrum as Scrum Master. Today I facilitated a retrospective and put a mood stoplight section before and after the session. What's the best thing I could do to follow up on feedback during the mood stoplight, or maybe just feedback in general for any sort of exercise that's run during a retrospective?
Sorry, I was reading questions.
Well, let me try and answer the question in that case, because the thing with the mood light is that when you do it at that point in time, it becomes a point in time measurement. That's by design, right? So that's what the mood is. So what I would normally do with a team that has those mood lights, I would essentially have people check in by just without any commentary, just changing their mood light during a daily scrum, or at the end, or right before a daily scrum, or maybe even just over the course of the day, and then figure out a way, either just like taking photos or by doing this in a digital system, to create a trend analysis, like a graph that you can, as a team, look at. So what happened during this sprint, and how do we feel now? That tends to be a much more fruitful, worthwhile conversation, um, that does something with the trend of the data, as opposed to, well, maybe I'm coming in and I haven't really slept well because I had a fight with my spouse, and therefore I'm grumpy and I think, everybody sucks, and therefore and that's something you usually don't share, right? So that's at least not the first thing you mention, but that could really factor into your opinion of the moment. But if you have it over the course of like several days, or maybe even weeks, depending on how long your sprints are, um, then there's more of a story arc to it, and that is what people respond to better, like the full story, the real story.
That's a good idea. Okay.
Great. And while going through those questions, I don't have focus. I'm reading and listening and typing, so I'm sorry for that. But I found another question that I can answer. It's by Nicolas Soleil. I hope I pronounced it well. The question is, when you refine the backlog, are you looking to decompose the work into small tasks that could then be delivered within a sprint? So that's a good question. So during product backlog refinement, you're doing you're refining your product backlog items. They might be into smaller parts, but those smaller parts still have to deliver value. So it's not about breaking them up into all kinds of small parts that do not deliver value. So you really want to think about, what is a slice of the work that I can deliver to get feedback on. So not just the small parts, but it's the small parts that deliver value, that can be shown to your stakeholder, that can get feedback during your sprint review. But it is an activity that you do during product backlog refinement, not just looking for the small parts, but looking for slices of work that can be delivered. I hope that answers your question.
Thanks.
And you do want those slices to be small enough to fit into a sprint. That's correct. Yeah. So have you found another question, Lawrence, that you want to answer?
Well, I've been looking through them, and I want to answer them all, but we don't have time. So I'm gonna defer to Lindsay and say, do we even have time? And is there any question you, as a specialist from Scrum.org, feel we definitely should answer before we go, or is it already time?
Well, I think these are all good questions. I think we do have time for one or two more, if we can keep the answers somewhat brief. And if not, that is okay. We just got to stay within our time box. This question here is about mindset, and it says, hi, one of the things a good Scrum Master should do is to make the organization embrace Scrum and have an agile mindset. What are your suggestions on how a Scrum Master can do that in an organization?
How can you instill an agile mindset, or trigger it, or jumpstart it, or
Yes, get it going.
Yeah, and I liked a quote there from the Army, like, captain goes first. As a Scrum Master, you should really also model that behavior. You should be agile yourself. You should show that you're really doing this, that you not just believe in this, but you live that value. And as you do that, you'll hopefully inspire some people, and then based on that, you can also talk about this, right? So, and then having those conversations, again, that's like in the Agile Manifesto, the first thing is people and interactions over processes and tools. So there's no any given process or tool that will ensure an agile mindset being instilled in the organization. In the end, that's a human thing. So you need to talk to people, and also boil it down to the core, right? The way an agile mindset is triggered and infused in an organization is by realizing the immense value of compound interest, because that's actually what's behind this. You do smaller changes, and 1% better every day will make you like a ridiculous percentage better per year, much more than one big honking percentage try every year. Right. So that's why Agile works. That's also why Scrum works. It chunks it down to smaller, really doable things. And of course, I could go on for days about this because it's my pet peeve, but still, let's stop now and maybe answer another question.
Okay. Evelyn, do you have anything to add there on that?
That question, no.
Okay. All right. Can a sprint have more than a single goal? A sprint with 3 to 5 sprint goals and then saying a few were met while others were not.
Well, the idea of the sprint goal, or one of the purposes, is that it gives you direction and focus. So if you have 3 to 5 sprint goals, what does that say about your focus and where are you going? So, but there might be an underlying problem, which we see in a lot of teams, that the activities of the people are so spread that it's difficult to find a common theme or a common sprint goal. But that's not a result of I would say bad Scrum, but it's a result of how the team is maybe constructed, or a product owner that does not make choices. But those are just assumptions. If you have trouble finding a sprint goal, you have people that are doing how do you call that? Dispersed spread, that are doing spread activities or spread work. I always advise look for the big generic thing that they're working on and call that the sprint goal. Take that as a sprint goal, the one thing that everybody's working on, and have that as a focus. The idea is to have one sprint goal, though.
That's good advice. Stay focused.
Yes.
Okay. So we are just about at our time. Are there any final words of wisdom that either of you want to leave with the audience? And also, please share with the audience how they can connect with you. We've had a few questions asking that.
Do you want to go first, Lawrence?
Well, anybody is free to connect with me with either on Twitter. My name is @LaurensBonema. You can figure out how to spell that by looking at the slides that you can download later. But you're also free to just hop in a call with me. Meet me on LinkedIn. Actually, LinkedIn is probably the fastest, easiest way to find me and connect with me. And you're free to do so. I really love talking to people about Scrum. So don't hesitate.
Great. And as we were in the introduction, you might have seen that we are both part of Scrum Boosters, which is a group of Scrum enthusiasts. And you can find us on Instagram and on TikTok. So if you are into those social media platforms, you look for Scrum Boosters, and then you will find both of us. And of course, you can connect with me on LinkedIn too. Or Instagram or Facebook or whatever social media you prefer. And well, happy to talk to you. I'm glad we have some new questions, Lawrence. Maybe we can release the next version of our 50 FAQs using some of these questions. What do you think?
There are definitely great questions in here, so thanks for listing them. We won't throw them away. We'll really try and answer them all, or at least consider a careful answer to them later. And I'd really like to thank you all for your attention and your participation in this webinar.
Great. Thank you both so much. Can you just go to the closing slides, please?
Yes, of course.
Thank you. So as some of you may know, we do have a Scrum Master learning path on the Scrum.org website. Highly encourage you to check that out along with our other learning paths if those are of interest. And next slide.
There we go.
And please stay connected with us. We run webinars like this one a couple times a month. So please check that out at scrum.org/webcasts, along with our other channels, including our forums and our blogs and all of our social media channels as well. And once again, I'd like to thank Lawrence and Evelyn for doing this session for us today. It's really great, really informative. Any questions that were not answered will be shared with them, so they will figure out a way to get an answer to you. So thank you both so much, and thank you, audience, for attending, and Scrum on.
Great. Thank you.
See.